My daughter Diane said, "You'll eat last, Mom." And something inside me didn't break it, just shifted. Not with a crash, not with anger, but like a seam in an old dress finally giving way after years of strain. I stood there, hands still warm from the oven mitts, staring at the apple pie I'd spent all day making. The crust was golden, flaky, the way my mother taught me. I'd peeled every apple by hand, sliced them thin, mixed in just enough cinnamon to make the kitchen smell like autumn. 8 hours of care for a pie nobody seemed to notice. I looked at the dining room table, crowded with Diane's friends and their kids, her husband Mark carving the ham like he was hosting a gala. Everyone was laughing, clinking glasses, passing plates, and me. I was supposed to wait, like I was the help, not the woman who raised her. So I picked up the pie, still warm in its dish, and walked toward the front door. My steps were steady, deliberate, the kind you take when you've made up your mind. No one called after me. No one even paused. Just the clatter of forks and a child's giggle in the background, oblivious to what had just happened. The Vermont air hit me as I stepped outside, sharp and cold, like it was waking me up. I walked the 4 blocks to my old house, the one I hadn't called home since Diane convinced me to move in with her 2 years ago. "It's easier, Mom," she'd said. "We'll take care of everything." The pie dish was heavy, the foil crinkling under my fingers, but I held it close, careful not to let the filling spill. When I unlocked my front door, the house smelled of cedar and dust, like it had been waiting for me to come back. I set the pie on the kitchen counter. The silence was thick but not heavy. It's no voices telling me where to stand or what to do. It's just me, the pie, and the soft creak of the floorboards under my feet. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. And in that moment, I knew something had changed. Not just tonight, but for good. I stood in my kitchen, the pie still steaming on the counter, and let the quiet settle around me. It wasn't the kind of silence that presses down. It's the kind you get when someone's waiting for you to do something, say something, fix something. This was different. It was mine. I pulled an old plate from the cupboard, one with a faded rose pattern chipped at the edge from years of use. I cut a slice of the apple pie, watched the filling ooze just a little, and sat at my table. My table, not Diane's polished mahogany one, crowded with people who barely looked at me. I took a bite. The apples were soft, the cinnamon sharp, but not overpowering. It was good. Maybe the best pie I'd ever made. I ate slowly, letting each bite linger, something I hadn't done in years. At Diane's house, meals were rushed, interrupted by her kids' chatter or her husband's phone buzzing. I was always the last to sit, the first to clear the plates. But here, in my own kitchen, no one was waiting for me to pour more water or fetch the salt. Just me and the pie and the faint hum of the fridge in the background. This house used to be full. My husband, Henry, and I raised our girls here, Diane and Clara. In this little Vermont cottage with its creaky stairs and windows that stuck in the summer. I'd been a seamstress back then, stitching wedding dresses for brides who'd cry when they saw themselves in the mirror. My hands knew every kind of lace, every hem, every bead. I'd sit in my sewing room upstairs, the radio playing Old Billy, holiday songs, and lose myself in the rhythm of the needle. That was before Henry's heart gave out, before Clara's car accident. Before I let Diane convince me to leave this place, Diane was always the driven one. Even as a kid, she'd organize her toys by color, scold her sister for leaving crayons on the floor. She grew up to be a lawyer, sharp and polished, always in control. "You don't need to worry, Mom," she'd say when she moved me into her house 2 years ago. "We'll handle the bills, the groceries, everything. Better this way." I wanted to believe her. I was 60 then, tired from years of working late, keeping the lights on after Henry was gone. But better. It wasn't better. It was convenient. For her, Clara was different. My youngest, soft where Diane was hard, always with a sketchbook in her hands. She'd draw flowers, birds, sometimes just the way the light hit the porch. When she died 5 years ago, hit by a truck on a rainy highway, she left a hole nothing could fill. And Liam, her son, only 15 then, went to live with Diane. I wanted to take him to raise him here. But Diane said I was too old, too frail. You can't handle a teenager. Mom, she'd said, her voice clipped like she was stating a fact in court. I'd let her decide. That was my first mistake. I looked around the kitchen now, the pie half-eaten on my plate. The clock on the wall ticked. Softly, a sound I hadn't noticed in years. I thought about Diane's voice, smooth but cutting, saying, "You'll eat last," as if I were an afterthought, as if 38 years of raising her, sewing her prom dress, driving her to college meant nothing. She'd always had a way of speaking that made you feel small, like her suggestions were kindness, but they were orders. "Don't wear that sweater, Mom. It's dated. You don't need to garden anymore. It's too much for you. Let me handle the bank account. It's easier." Easier for who? I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet. When she sighed at my slow typing on her fancy tablet. When she told me not to join her book club because I'd feel out of place. When she suggested I start planning for the end, like I was an expiration date on a milk carton. I'd told myself it wasn't worth fighting. Family's supposed to be messy, right? You compromise. You bend. But bending too long makes you forget how to stand. Then there was Liam, Clara's boy, now 20, studying art at the community college. He had her eyes, her quiet way of noticing things others missed. He'd come by Diane's house sometimes, sit with me on the back porch, and ask about my old sewing projects. "Did you ever make a dress for yourself, Grandma?" he'd asked once. I hadn't, not in years. I was always too busy making things for others. I finished the pie and washed the plate, the water warm against my hands. Outside, the maple leaves rustled, their edges turning red with the early fall. I used to rake those leaves every October, piling them high for Clara's kids to jump in. Diane said it was risky now. "You could slip, Mom. Let Mark hire someone." She never asked if I wanted to rake them. She just decided. As I dried the plate, I spotted an old envelope in the drawer, tucked under a stack of dish towels. A utility bill addressed to me, but with Diane's name scribbled in the corner, like she'd claimed it. Something about it felt off, like a stitch that doesn't sit right. I set it aside, telling myself I'd look at it later. I sat by the window, the house wrapping around me like an old quilt. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was borrowing someone else's space. I felt like I was home, and I knew I wasn't going back. The morning after I left Diane's house with a pie, I woke to the sound of birds outside my window. Not the sharp honks of cars from Diane's cul-de-sac, but the soft chatter of sparrows in the maple trees. My bed felt different, like it remembered me. I lay there for a while, letting the light creep across the ceiling, not rushing to make anyone's breakfast or fold anyone's laundry. For the first time in years, the day was mine. I made tea using the old kettle Henry bought when we first moved here. It whistled unevenly, but I didn't mind. I sat at the kitchen table with a slice of cold apple pie, the crust still crisp, the filling even sweeter after sitting overnight. I didn't heat it up. I just ate, savoring the quiet, the way the house seemed to hold its breath around me. That envelope I'd found last night, the one with Diane's handwriting in the corner, was still on the counter. I opened it, expecting an old electric bill. But it wasn't just a bill. It was a notice from the bank addressed to me, about a transfer of funds to an account I didn't recognize. Diane's name was listed as an authorized user. My stomach tightened. "I let her handle things, bills, accounts for convenience," she'd said. But this felt like something else. I pulled out my laptop, the one Diane had called ancient because it took a minute to start. I logged into my bank account, fumbling through passwords I hadn't touched in months. The screen loaded, and there it was. My savings, still there, but smaller than I remembered. A joint checking account had Diane's name on it, with transfers. I hadn't approved school fees, subscriptions, even a monthly household contribution I'd never seen itemized. I sat back, my tea growing cold. How had I let this happen? I thought of Diane's voice, smooth as polished glass, saying, "Let me take care of it, Mom. You don't need the stress." I'd trusted her, thinking it was what families do. But trust shouldn't feel like losing yourself. I picked up the phone and called the bank. "This is Margaret Ellison," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to make some changes." The woman on the line was kind, patient. "You're the primary account holder, Mrs. Ellison," she confirmed after a few security questions. "You can remove authorized users anytime." I told her to do it, all of them. No more joint access, no more automatic transfers. She hesitated. "There's a recurring payment of $300 to a private school. Should I cancel that too?" I didn't. Pause. Yes, everything. By noon, I'd changed the passwords, set up a new email just for banking, and scheduled an in-person visit to the branch. I wanted to see the papers, sign them myself, look someone in the eye when I said, "This is mine." It wasn't about anger. It was about clarity. That afternoon, I called Mr. Peterson, the lawyer who'd helped Henry and me with our wills years ago. His voice crackled through the phone, older now, but still warm. "Maggie, it's been a while. What's on your mind?" I didn't sugarcoat it. "I need to revise my will. And I want to set up a trust for my grandson, Liam." He didn't ask why. He just said, "Come by tomorrow. We'll sort it out." I hung up and walked through the house, really looking at it for the first time in years. The sewing room upstairs was dusty, but the old Singer machine still sat. In the corner, threads tangled from my last project, a quilt I never finished. I opened the window, let the cool Vermont air sweep in, and started cleaning. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I swept the floor, wiped down the shelves, and found a box of fabrics, scrap silk, cotton, a bit of velvet I'd saved. For something special. My hands itched too, so again. Outside, the garden was a mess. Weeds had taken over the flower beds, but the lavender I'd planted years ago was still there, stubborn and purple. Diane had told me to stop gardening. "It's too much for you, Mom. Let it go." But I didn't want to let it go. I wanted to dig my hands into the soil, feel the earth give way, so I did. I pulled a few weeds, not many, just enough to remind myself I could. The doorbell rang as the sun dipped low, painting the sky pink. It was Liam, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "Grandma," he said, his voice soft, like Clara's. He held a sketchbook, the edges worn. "I heard you left last night with the pie." He grinned, but his eyes were searching. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He sat at the kitchen table, flipping through his sketches, trees, faces, a drawing of Clara from an old photo. "Mom was pissed," he said quietly. "She didn't say it, but I could tell. Everyone was asking where the pie went." I smiled. "Just a little. I ate it. It was good." He laughed, short and real. "Good for you." We talked for a while about his art classes, about the way Clara used to hum while she cooked. He didn't ask why I laughed, and I didn't explain. He just sat there, present, like he saw me. Not Grandma, who picks up the kids or washes the dishes, but me, Maggie, who used to make dresses that made women feel like queens. Before he left, he hugged me, quick but tight. "You okay here?" he asked. "I'm getting there," I said. He nodded, like he understood. "I'll come back soon. Maybe draw your garden or something." After he was gone, I stood in the sewing room holding a piece of blue silk. It caught. The light, soft and alive. I didn't know what I'd make yet, but it didn't matter. I was starting again, and then I saw it tucked in a drawer with old receipts, a document. Official looking, with my house's address and Diane's name. Not just a bill, a property transfer notice. My heart skipped. I hadn't signed this. I set it on the table, my hand steady, but my mind racing. Something wasn't right, and I was going to find out what. The document sat on my kitchen table like a weight I hadn't asked to carry. A property transfer notice, my house's address in bold print, Diane's name listed as the new owner. My signature was there, neat and precise, but I hadn't signed it. My hands didn't shake as I stared at it, but something inside me tightened, like a thread pulled to taut. I'd spent years letting Diane handle things, bills, accounts, decisions, because I thought it was what families do. But this was theft, not just of a house, but of me. I folded the paper and placed it in a drawer next to the old sewing patterns I hadn't touched in years. I needed to think, to be sure, before I acted. The next morning, I walked to the bank, the air crisp with the scent of pine and damp leaves. I wore my wool coat, the one Clara bought me years ago, its buttons still shiny despite the frayed cuffs. At the counter, I asked for Kevin, the young man who'd helped me remove Diane's access. "I need to check something," I said, sliding the document across. He frowned, his fingers pausing over the keyboard. "This looks like a title transfer, Mrs. Ellison, but your name's still on the deed in our records. No changes filed." I exhaled, relief mixing with dread. "Can you print everything? Every transaction? Every form with my name?" He nodded, and 10 minutes later I walked out with a folder of papers. My proof, my truth. Back home, I called Mr. Peterson, the lawyer. "I found something," I told him. "A document saying my house belongs to Diane. I didn't sign it." His voice sharpened. "Bring it in, Maggie, today." Kay at his office, he studied the paper, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Kay, this is forged," he said plainly. "We'll need to file a claim to protect your title. And we'll send a cease letter to Diane. She can't act on this." I nodded, my heart steady but heavy. "I want Liam to have the house. Not now, but when I'm gone. Can we make that happen?" "We can," he said, scribbling notes. "Trust will keep it safe. You'll stay in control until then." I left his office feeling lighter, not because the problem was solved, but because I was doing something. Not waiting, not bending, not hoping Diane would change. I was choosing that. Evening, the doorbell rang. Diane stood on my porch, her arms crossed, a casserole dish in her hands, foil crinkling like it was nervous. "Mom," she said, her voice too bright, like she was selling something. "Brought dinner? Can we talk?" I opened the door wider, but didn't take the dish. "Come in," I said. She set the casserole on the counter, her eyes darting around the kitchen, lingering on the fabric scraps I'd left out. "You're sewing again?" she asked, like it was a surprise. "I never stopped," I lied, just to see how it felt. It felt good. She sat, her posture stiff, like she was in a courtroom. "I'm sorry about the other night," she said. "I didn't mean to upset you. Things got hectic with the guests. Do you know how it is?" "Do I?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. "You told me to eat last, Diane, like I was the hired help." Her smile faltered. "I didn't mean it like that." "You're taking it too personally." I leaned forward, holding her gaze. "I'm taking it exactly as it was." She shifted, her fingers twisting the edge of her scarf. "Look, let's start fresh. Come for dinner Sunday. Just family. I'll make your favorite lemon chicken." I didn't answer right away. I thought about the years I'd spent in her house, cooking her meals, folding her kids' clothes, paying half her bills while she called it helping me. I thought about the document in my drawer, her name where mine should have been. I said, finally, "I'm done eating at your table." Her face hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You're just going to cut me out." I stood, walked to the drawer, and pulled out the document. I slid it across the table. "Did you think I wouldn't find this?" Her eyes widened just for a second before she caught herself. "That's just paperwork, Mom. I was protecting you. You're not getting any younger." "I thought it'd be easier if I handled the house." "Easier for who?" I asked. "You forged my signature, Diane. You tried to take my home." She stood, her voice rising. "I was trying to keep things organized. You don't understand how much I've done for you, letting you live with us, paying for everything." "You didn't pay for everything," I said, my voice steady. I did, and you took more than I ever gave. She froze, her mouth opening, then closing. I saw it then, the flicker of guilt, buried under years of control. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, softer now. You just didn't care if you did. She didn't answer. The silence stretched, heavy, but not uncomfortable. For once, I wasn't filling it. I've already seen a lawyer, I said. The house stays mine. Liam gets it when I'm gone. You have no claim. Her face crumpled, not with tears, but with something closer to shock. You're giving everything to Liam. He's a kid. He's Clara's kid, I said, and he sees me. You stopped? Seeing me a long time ago. She grabbed the casserole dish like she needed something to hold on to. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice low. No, I said. I'm correcting one. She left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. I stood in the kitchen, the smell of apples still faint in the air. I didn't feel angry, didn't feel sad. I felt free. The next day, I met with Mr. Peterson again. We filed the claim to void the forged transfer and finalized the trust for Liam. I walked home through the park, the leaves crunching under my feet, the sky a soft gray. I wasn't running from Diane anymore. Was walking toward myself. I moved back into my house for good that week. The air smelled of lavender and fresh paint, the walls glowing soft yellow from the coat I'd rolled on myself. I didn't need Diane's permission to make it mine again. I set up my sewing machine in the upstairs room, threading it with blue silk I'd saved for years. I didn't know what I'd make yet, a dress, a quilt, something just for me. It didn't matter. Starting was enough. The garden came next. I planted new lavender, some rosemary, a few marigolds that bowed their heads in the Vermont wind. Liam came by on Saturday, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. Grandma, he said, setting a paper bag on the table, I brought muffins. Blueberry, your favorite. We sat in the kitchen sharing muffins, the crumbs scattering like confetti. He didn't ask about Diane, and I didn't bring her up. Instead, we talked about Clara, her laugh, her habit of sketching clouds on napkins. I miss her, he said, his voice quiet. Me too, I said. But you carry her, Liam. In your hands, your art. Smiled. A little sad, a little proud. I drew your garden yesterday. It's not done yet, but I'll show you when it is. Before he left, I handed him a letter. Not long, just a page. Read it later, I said. It's about you, about this house, about what matters. Inside, I'd written, Liam, what I have is yours, not because you're a family, but because you see me. You never ask me to be less than I am. That's love. That's legacy. Don't let anyone tell you different. After he was gone, I stood on the porch watching the leaves fall, the sky turning soft gold. Diane didn't call again. Maybe she was angry. Maybe she was ashamed. It didn't matter. I wasn't waiting for her to understand. I'd spent years fading into someone else's life, stitching their seams, baking their pies, thinking love meant giving until you're empty. But it doesn't. Love leaves room for you to stand tall, to eat first, to breathe your own air. If you're listening, if you've ever felt invisible in a house you helped build, this is for you. You don't need permission to claim your place. You don't need to wait for someone to see you. Pick up your pie, your heart, your life. Start now. Your worth was never up for debate.